My name is Lo from California. We got Dobbs in Philly. You got AJ down below. We are the Suit Up Geeks, and welcome back to the Suit Up Geek Fix podcast. This is yet another versus series. We have an epic matchup in honor of Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It. We have the original Conjuring versus the Conjuring 2. Two excellent James Wan horror feasts. And you guys ready to just dig right in or what?
Dig in.
Let's go.
Yes.
All right. So first up, we're gonna break down The Conjuring, give it some grades. Remind me, Dives. We got 5 categories, right?
Story, visuals, memorable moments, rewatchability, and then overall film grade.
5 scores from the 3 of us, and then we'll average it out. And we'll compare that to Conjuring 2 and see who wins at the end. So with that being said, guys, let's talk about the story of The Conjuring. Let me just kind of prelude this talk here by saying that I was always the type where I would see based on a true story in a horror film, and I'm like, really? Really? Or like inspired by true events. And I feel like sometimes studios tag that on to intrigue us and get us to watch the movie. But in the case of the Warrens, who are arguably one of the most famed, notorious paranormal researchers, in history, I think it had some weight to the stories that James Wan was telling. And with that being said, whenever you do a true account, it is really interesting trying to like pick apart, like, okay, what is real, what is fake. But I think regardless, the story of this family and this house was definitely something that spoke to me, because when I was a kid, I got nightmares from the Amityville Horror. The original Amityville Horror with Thanos' dad, James Brolin. Not Josh Brolin, James Brolin. And if you guys don't know this, but the remake with Ryan Reynolds, that was James Brolin's character. Don't hear what I'm not saying. Nicole's calling me out on my catchphrases. Thank you, Mrs. Diebler. Thank you for joining the chat. But yeah, the Amityville Horror, even going back to like The Exorcist, like 70s horror was a landmark in horror for scaring us with things we couldn't see, for keeping things simple and practical, scaring us with sounds and feelings rather than blood and guts and there's a monster in front of your face. And I really respect James Wan for doing all that he did with The Conjuring, because the first time I saw it, I was truly, truly shook. It really got under my skin. I will never in my life put a blindfold on and play hide and clap. No, thank you. I don't care who I'm playing with. I don't care how drunk I am. I ain't going to play that game and hear claps. Nope. No, thank you. So in terms of just the family story and the way it was executed by James Wan, I'll give the story an 8.2 to start, just to kick things off on a good foot.
Here we go.
AJ, my man, what's your grade for the story, and what do you think of the story of The Conjuring?
I'm going to give it a 9 out of 10 for the story. I really do think this is just a simple story about a family. Just coming together basically, and for that reason, and it just overall it just succeeded on that end, which is perfect for me. I did not realize James Gunn was, at the time at least, I didn't realize James Gunn was
James Wan.
Huh?
James Wan.
What did I say?
James Gunn.
James Wan. My bad. But
Different show.
I know, my bad. But I just think that the story altogether was just done beautifully. The story about the family was done great. The horror elements for the story was done perfect. And it's the one movie that actually got my attention for James Wan overall. So 9 out of 10 for me.
Excellent. Shouts out to Almost Sideways podcast. Guys, check them out. Great friends of the channel. And I believe is Adam joining us tomorrow?
I don't believe so. I don't think so.
Okay, well, he joined us in our previous drafts. Great friend of the show. He said he still remembers the first time we saw the clapping hands, and it scared the crap out of him. Hell yes. Dives, what's your overall score for the story, and what are your thoughts about it?
When we first saw The Conjuring in the theater, it was hands down one of my favorite movie experiences of all time. We saw it opening night. It was one of those movies that came out. The hype was immense. We saw it opening night, and we lived in a house where, I shit you not, it had an attic door, and no one knew there was an attic door. And we got home, and the attic door was open, and the stairs were down. So could you imagine our response after watching The Conjuring, one of the scariest movies of all time? And we're like, what the hell is there an attic door doing? It was awesome. It was just like...
I can imagine the conversation, like the finger pointing, like, God, are you shitting me? Are you fucking kidding me?
Yeah, like...
Did you fucking put this down?
We thought for sure someone was pranking someone. Also, we had a buddy living with us at the time. But Conjuring 1, it doesn't rely on CGI. It doesn't rely on jump scares. It's a slow build. Story development is the nuts and bolts of what makes The Conjuring so incredible. I love how the villain is pure evil. I love that you can feel her presence, the witch's presence, like at every single turn. You don't really see her until like two scenes, like the one scene on the cabinet and the other scene at the very end of the climax. So nuts and bolts wise, the build up of the story. So I guess it depends, like The Haunting of Hill House. If you love shows like that slow build where it's the atmosphere, the story, the character building is so well done. And the payoff at the end is one of the most bananas moments I have ever experienced at the time. I'm going 9.5.
Epic. We also got Geekly Goods in the house. Like and follow them as well. He says the second one is forgettable a bit, but the first one is incredible horror masterpiece. And Geekly Goods, my man Leo, I gotta agree. The Conjuring is one of my favorite modern horror films of this time, from anything post 2000. It was such a refreshing take to get away from, like, I mean, admittedly, it's this franchise that James Wan started, but it was a nice, refreshing take to get away from torture porn, to get away from slashers, to get away from stuff that was kind of getting borderline cheesy. Like we've seen it before.
Ironically, he started the franchise of Saw, so it was like, it's so interesting how that dynamic works. But that was like the main difference here is that, at the time, Insidious came on before, which I absolutely love, kind of a similar mold. But everything at that time, 2013, was straight, cheap scares, jump scares, and that's the movie. This movie was all about introducing amazing characters, having heavy hitter characters, and building that whole dynamic, and then having a payoff at the end.
I completely forgot he did Saw too.
He started the Saw franchise. Yeah. I like that he stepped away and did something different, something completely refreshing. So with that being said, I think one of my favorite aspects of The Conjuring is its visual flair and style. James Wan's got it in spades. AJ, what would you grade the visuals, and anything you want to note on the visual style of this film?
I'll give it a 8 out of 10 for visuals. Much like what Dad was saying, it doesn't really focus too much on the visual side of storytelling, but what it does successfully in is the horror elements of the visual side, which I have to commend them on. I really love the makeup, and even the costumes within this movie, from the witch's makeup, which was done perfect. If it scared you, then they did their job perfectly for makeup. The house, I can't remember if this was the first one, if this is the same house that we get in other horror movies recently, but I think this was the first time we actually got that house, the house. So it's on my rewatch. I was like, is that the same house as like the one in Insidious, or even in Ouija or stuff like that? I was like, is that the same house? Because it was okay. But visually aside, I think it was decent. I can't really complain because it didn't really focus on that element, More so, it focused on the storytelling part, which was for me.
Well said, man. Honestly, this is probably one of my favorite shot pictures in the horror genre. James Wan, and I can't recall who did his cinematography with him. Forgive me, but they did a fantastic job. Like, I was rewatching it the other day because I hadn't seen it in a few years, and there is a one shot when the family moves in, and it's freaking beautiful. Like, we follow the young girl.
Yeah.
We go under a chair, under a couch with the movers, into the living room. She's looking for her sister. We follow her into the kitchen. It rotates all the way around, and she puts wind chimes up outside, and it's just immaculately shot. Stuff like that really gives like more weight to a film versus just being rah rah scared, haha, okay, go home. It really shows James Wan's a master of his craft. And like Dives was saying, this is definitely a slow burn. We don't really get any frightening visuals until maybe like an hour into the film. I think when we see Bathsheba on top of the wardrobe, which again, I think when you do the slow burn correctly, it makes those moments so much more meaningful. Because when they come, then you're like, oh shit. I think when they were playing and Bathsheba was on top of the wardrobe, I literally was like, oh! I literally like gasped really loudly. That was embarrassing. So yeah, I just gotta shouts out to he makes the visuals count. Especially one that stuck out to me was when Lorraine falls through the wall. Because I feel like, there's always a sense of comfort when you're with other characters, in my opinion, or when you're in a room full of people. But the fact that she was inside of the wall and she just dropped to the God knows where, she might as well have dropped into hell. That set up such an intense moment for her in the cellar. And then she saw the lady's face, and then she saw, the music box, and she did the thing with the mirror, and that damn music box is such a great setup. So I don't want to take too many away from Dives, man. I truly love this picture. There's so many great setups and payoffs with the way James Wan presents it visually to us, and it just makes it so horrifying. So I'll give the visuals a 9.6. Dives, how about you, man? How would you grade the visuals?
You're mute.
You're on mute, buddy. But before that, Geekly
go.
Good saying James Wan knows how to build tension, and he knows how to create haunting sequences, even in non-horror movies.
He really loves
Shouts out to the Trench and Aquaman.
Really
Amen, Geekly Goods. But go ahead, Dubs.
There's so many like visually amazing moments, like that scene where the wind picks up and the one sheet hits like the ghost and then flies up into the window, and then you see the ghost in the
great transition.
It's just unbelievable. Like, there's just so many creative moments in this film. For me, the visuals get a 9.5, and I want to give a quick nod, of course, to the composer here. I'm gonna butcher this name, Joseph Bishara. I don't know how to pronounce that, but this is one of the best horror film scores of all time. For visuals though, like, I love how The Conjuring has like no light. There's like literally no light in this movie, which, just to piggyback off of what you, Loretto, said, like, it just, that is super symbolic when she falls into the basement, where she just has this like box of matches, and she's just warding off like all these different things, spirits going on. There's no light in this film. That just does. James Wan does such a good job with camera angles and panning shots and sound effects and all these like cool techniques that make it one of the best atmospheres in a horror movie, period. I think that alone grounds the personalities of Ed and Lorraine. I can't speak enough of the visuals, and I'm going to pretty much echo the same thoughts of The Conjuring 2. I'm giving it a 9.5.
Epic. And I think the next portion is the memorable moments, right?
Yep.
So I think we are all in agreement about the initial clap next to the mom's ear when she has the match.
Awesome.
I think that's probably the most iconic scene in the film.
Yeah.
But I kind of want to shout out to the maid who I think cut her wrists. because that was actually a scare that really got me. It was when the cop was kind of just nosing around, and I kind of like that. You know, if the cop doesn't feel safe, that the audience, or me as an audience member, if the cop is scared, I'm gonna be scared. And the fact that the lady was like, "Look what you made me do," and it kind of gave me Sixth Sense vibes. But the way that James Wan presented that scare was really effective. Like, you know, there's some jump scares that are super cheap, like loud music, and it's like, oh, of course you get scared. But the way that was set up was really, really well executed. And also for me, the music box, like even to the last final scene, even if you don't see anything, it's so unsettling hearing the little twinkling of the box, and then the stupid clown that like comes up and down, and then the mirror swirls, and it's like that last shot in the film, you don't see anything, but you almost like are ready for it and you're tense, and it's like, that's just beautiful filmmaking, storytelling there. So memorable moments, I gotta give it like, damn, maybe like, you know what? Fuck it. I'm gonna give it a 10. It's truly one of the best horror films of the decade, and because of those moments that stand out, there's so many. I want to save some for you guys though. So AJ, memorable moments, what do you got, and what is your grade for the moments?
It's a 10 out of 10. Straight up 10 out of 10 for me. Yeah. We already know that the clapping scenes is the most iconic scene of the movie, but this one shot specifically I do want to mention is when Lorraine looks up at the tree and you see the witch's body just hanging from the tree. I feel like that was the most powerful shot in this entire movie, and the way she expressed her emotions during that one scene, it was bone chilling. Sometimes it annoys me sometimes when there's so many Oscar caliber acting calibers for horror movies with Vera Farmiga and many other actresses, and they don't give enough credit for their work, especially during the Oscar time. They only focus on drama, even though I do believe that horror should definitely be in the consideration for best acting as well, because the way they perform and express their emotions while doing action and stuff like that, it's amazing. So that was just the one shot I do want to mention mostly.
And then you gave it a 10 as well, right?
Yeah.
You know, I love that you mentioned that, because the look on her face, that's actually what gave me goosebumps. Like the way she looked up, and it made me nervous, because I was like, what are you looking at? And then you see the feet, and it's like, oh God. But yeah, Vera Farmiga is great, and you're right. Toni Collette, Lupita Nyong'o. There's so many like wonderful horror performances that don't even get a nomination at least. So
I know.
Come on, guys. I don't know what's going on with the Academy in that end, but Dibes, how about you, man? Memorable moments.
Yes.
Would you put Conjuring over Sinister?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, I would. But I low-key love Sinister. That's one of the best.
I love them all. I love Insidious. It's one of my guilty pleasures. I love Sinister. I love them all.
All right. For me, it's a 9.5. We all touched on the clap scene. That scene was so epic that, like, literally 3 days later, like, I'm in the bathroom taking a piss in the dark, like, and then you hear this, and I'm like, oh God, I'm heading back to bed, like, you know what I mean? Like, we were pranking each other all the time. That's how epic and memorable that scene was. We touched on it. Lorraine's fall to the basement was one of my favorite movie experiences of all time. Just on the edge of your seat. It's so dark. And you just have your main character. She's literally trapped. She's immobilized. Mm-hmm. You just feel for her so much because of everything that came before it. That scene just always emphasizes, and I've been saying this so many times, it's always scarier what you don't see rather than what you do see. And you talked about, Loretto, that device where you don't know if a ghost is going to show up at any single moment. This scene really truly nails home, like, what's around the next corner, and you kind of saw that at the last clip there. And I'm giving this a 9.5 out of 10. It's just one of my favorite films of all time, let alone horror movies of all time.
Epic. And that brings us to rewatchability. I was really, really pleased with the rewatch. I did last night, actually. I don't know why I did that to myself. Late night horror viewing, but it was just as effective as I remember it.
So good.
And I also didn't realize how many subtle homages that James Wan did to past horror films. Because like I said, it felt like an old school horror. It felt like an Amityville Horror, the original 70s film. It felt like, obviously when you do possession, obviously you can't help but think of The Exorcist you can't think of a demonic possession without thinking of The Exorcist, if I had to get that on my mouth. But also the birds, subtle nods to Alfred Hitchcock's Birds. I thought that was interesting as a horror effect to have the birds kill themselves against the wall.
Yeah.
That was chilling, and also I like that visual of the birds swarming the house to show how powerful Bathsheba is. And also just, of course, the camera work. That's something that I can always look back on as a film nerd and just break down his shots and the way he did it, following someone with a steady cam or just the way he's holding it and pulling back from I don't know if they hoist the camera on on a wire. I know some films do that. John Woo's famous for that. A lot of interesting techniques that I can break down at will. So for me, if there's people that haven't seen this film, I would gladly watch with them. To that point though, I don't know how often I'd rewatch this film as much as an action picture, but I do love horror films and I do love this one. I'll give it an 8.4 for rewatchability. What about you, Dives? I know the decimals are killing you.
I know, and you're the worst. I'm just kidding. For me, it's a 9 out of 10. I've seen this movie probably 10 plus times. We watched it again this week, as well as Conjuring 2, which we'll be getting into very soon. It holds up. It holds up so incredibly well. Even though you know the basement scene, the clap and hide scene, everything in this film. The jump, this truly shows you how James Wan just threw the horror genre upside down. And every single time you watch it, it's the atmosphere, it's the costume design, it's the amazing music, the film score. It just throws you into this nightmare hell situation for this family. For me, it's a 9 out of 10. It's still scary to this day.
So Nicole's shouting out the scene when the daughter's in the basement crawling around and the mom comes after her. Yeah, I mean, I don't know why anyone kept wanting to go back down there, but I think when she was playing hide and clap, the mom actually went down her on her own, right?
Yeah.
That would have been a big nope. If I saw that door open by itself, I'm gonna just close it. I'm pretend nobody wants me to go down there.
Nope, I'm out.
AJ, how about you, man? What would you grade the rewatchability for Conjuring 1?
I'm gonna give it a 9 out of 10. I've probably watched this movie just the same amount as Dives did. I watched it actually 4 times in the theater. It's my 5th most watched movie in the theater.
Wow.
So I really love this movie. Second one, we'll get into that, but yeah, 9 out of 10 for me on this one.
Okay. Awesome. So that brings us to our overall score. And I just got to say, like I said, in the 2010s, we had a horror renaissance, from Ari Aster to Robert Eggers with The Witch to Jordan Peele and Get Out, which we did last week for our last versus, and even to A Quiet Place, which is the sequel right now, is breaking cleaning up at the box office, doing really well. I'm really happy to be a horror fan right now. I think this generation of filmmakers really understands how to make their stories unique and how to entertain us. And I think James Wan has proved it. I think Insidious was kind of his... What was that?
Look at Mike Flanagan. He's one of the best right now and kind of following that same script as James Wan.
Yeah, definitely. And I think Insidious, which I love as well, I think Insidious was kind of a prelude to this. He was kind of getting warmed up. And then Conjuring was a haymaker, he just hit us with it. And it was just a masterful horror film. You guys, we've all been saying, I think we all love this film. I got to give it a 9.7. Definitely one of the best films of the decade. Chris P. Bacon gives it a 9.5. He's taking 0.5 away because anything Ron Livingston is in, he can't help but wait for Bill Lumbergh to pop up and ask him to come in on Saturday. I hate that guy. Gary Cole is great. He was also, wasn't he the dad from the Brady Bunch movie?
I believe so.
And I think he was the bad guy in Pineapple Express. But anyways, that guy's awesome. You know what's funny is I actually like Ron Livingston. I always mix him up with the guy from The League. But regardless, they're both great actors. Yeah, AJ, I know you got to head out soon, but what would you give the overall score for The Conjuring? Any final thoughts on the film?
I'm gonna be nice to Dives. I'm gonna stick with a 9 out of 10 for overall grade.
You could throw in a decimal in there.
I'm okay. This is what I will. This is the last thing I will say. I love the family aspect of this movie. James Wan did a fantastic job directing this. The score was amazing. The cinematography was amazing. James Wan loves his one take shots. That's all I know, and that's why I love him so much. Is because of those one take shots in basically all of his movies. So yeah, I love the horror elements of this movie. The score, like I said, is amazing. Overall, 9 out of 10.
You know, also, I can't remember the kid's name. Shouts out to the young Asian kid that's helping the Warrens. I really liked his character too. It's kind of fun to like. I think he was kind of like the comic relief a little bit. Always joking with the cop, like, "Oh, better than a guy with a gun, right?" Like. And then I liked how when the possession, the exorcism was happening, he was still looking for I can't remember her name. He was looking for the daughter, and I appreciate those kind of do good or good guys. Like, against all odds, he went back in the house. You know what I mean? Dives, overall score for The Conjuring. Any final thoughts on the film?
So real quick, 9.5 out of me. Just it's the perfect combination of like terror, that slow build up with an amazing payoff. It's got an amazing film score, the atmosphere, the costume design, all of that together is one of my favorite horror movies and experiences of all time. And that includes the best of the best. I can't rate it higher than a 9.5 because that's when we're getting into some crazy territory there. But I do save that 10 out of 10 for the special one. So 9.5 is so good.
Epic. I'm in full agreement. I almost gave it a 10, but just comparably to like, Hereditary, which is probably my favorite horror film of the past like 30 years. It's hard for me to just shell out the 10, but it's pretty damn close. With that being said, we have a resoundingly positive review of The Conjuring. I think we're all in agreement here. It's a horror landmark. Really quickly, which basement scene is better, Conjuring or The Visit?
Ooh, that's a good one.
It is a good one because I hate that lady in The Visit.
She's intense. She's really intense.
She's really feral. Like, and her damn hair.
I'm gonna have to rewatch The Visit again.
Yeah, no, honestly, I think the crawling really gives The Visit a lot of edge and tension. But I think as a whole, I think The Conjuring did a lot more with what it gave us. So with that being said, let's go into The Conjuring 2, which takes the Warrens not only to London, but facing some demons from the Amityville murders that I mentioned earlier. I thought that was a really interesting take for the introduction. And I hadn't seen The Conjuring 2 until today. And last night. I couldn't finish it because I was kind of freaking out. Just first impressions, and I'm going to dig into the story of The Conjuring 2 here. We find ourselves in London. There's a similar wildly paranormal event happening with another family, another girl getting traumatized by a demon. And it was really interesting to bring the Warrens overseas, but I think it was a little bit refreshing to see a UK version of a horror story. I think we've seen a lot of American haunted houses, so it's nice to see a different setting here. My only complaint is it wasn't as vibrant as I would like it to be, especially with UK having so much to its city. But I know that the focus of the story was in the house, I guess. So there wasn't much for us to explore in London itself. But again, it's kind of like a run-of-the-mill haunting. There's a lot that we see here that's not all that different from the first one, but I think my issue with the story is that it seems like James Wan was trying to outdo himself. I think he fell into the Shyamalan syndrome where he felt the need to try to outdo himself. He introduced the Crooked Man. We have Bill Wilkins or whatever as the initial spirit, and then ultimately it's all the work of Valak, the nun. I think it was a little bit convoluted in a sense, like, I mean, the twist of knowing it was the nun all along was interesting, but it just was a little hard to follow initially. Especially, I think the Crooked Man was a little bit unnecessary, and I'll go into the visual aspect of that later. But for the story in general, I liked the resolution, and I liked tying in Lorraine's vision of Ed, potentially, possibly passing away. But for me, it just wasn't as strong, and that's gonna be a theme for me for the rest of this review. I'll give the story a 7. What about you, AJ?
All right, I'm just going to do a rundown on all of them before I get out of here. So my story is 8.5 out of 2. I do agree with oh my God, I do agree with you on the Crooked Man wasn't necessary. I think James Wan tried to put too much into one story within this within Conjuring 2. When I first watched this, I thought Bill Wilkins was acting as the Crooked Man at a point, and then I was confused. It was like, is he the Crooked Man? And then is he not the Crooked? So it was really confusing.
It was hard to follow.
Yeah, exactly. But overall, I once again, I do love the family aspect of this movie. It's just staying with the first Conjuring. So that is just what got me on board with it regardless. It is forgettable, much like what Loretta was talking about earlier in comments. The Conjuring 2. Huh?
I think Leo said that.
Oh, yeah. So, yeah, Leo did say that in the comments. He said that Conjuring 2 was forgettable, which I do agree because it was so convoluted with the storytelling. Visuals, I'll give it what did I give it? What did I give it a visual? Oh, 10 out of 10 for visuals. That scene where Valak in the shadow and the painting, I feel like that scene was very, very, it was done perfectly. I really love that scene as a whole visually. That was the main one I wanted to talk, just to mention that one. Memorable moments, the same as my visuals. It was that moment where she comes out of the painting. It's probably the best scene out of Conjuring 2 for me, and I gave that an 8 out of 10. Then overall score, I gave it an 8.5 out of 10. Like I said, it is convoluted, but I still have this movie still has a special place in my heart because I love horror and I love how James Wan does his movies. And rewatchability is a 6 out of 10. I haven't watched this as much as the first one. I probably watched it like 3 or 4 times at the most. This is probably my 5th time this morning when I watched it. So that was my rewatchability. It's a 6 out of 10.
Epic.
Am I missing
real quick,
anything?
I want to shout out to Christy. That's awesome. I did not know Christy was a senior paranormal investigator, but she also said that the first Conjuring was the only movie to have her keep her lights on at night. I'll have to agree with that sentiment. That really got under my skin. But for AJ, man, I want to thank you for joining us. I know you got to get on. Always a pleasure, brother. He's a third of our 4 Suit Up Geek hosts, and it's always awesome when we're all on together. So,
aren't you going to see The Conjuring right now?
Yes, sir. Yes, I am.
I can't wait to hear your thoughts. AJ is on the way to see Conjuring Devil Made Me Do It.
All right. See you guys.
Take care, bud. All right. So that brings us to visuals, which I am so excited to talk about. Wait, did you tell your story yet?
No, my story is a 9.2 out of 10.
Okay.
It's definitely the Conjuring 2 is a lot more depressing, I think, than the first one. Like, you've got a single parent She's got sad children. She has no money. She can't afford any biscuits. There's no dad. Everything's helpless. It's downright depressing. And I think that's like, it works for James Wan because, you know, we all know that demons feed off of depression and sadness and the elements of fear. So that really works. I thought it made it a lot more scary. I think the story of The Conjuring 2 is a lot more emotional. I love how Janet is more of a protagonist, a better protagonist than any of the characters there in the first Conjuring. So it's a different movie, but I thought the villain was a step up than the first Conjuring. The image of the nun at the end of the hall is as scary as The Conjuring is. That nun at the end of the hall, where like that's hands down one of like the best moments, and we're gonna get into best moments. But for me, story is a 9.2 out of 10. I love how they have this concept of like a demon latched on to a ghost. You know, that was a fun twist. This is such an underrated movie, and it's one that holds up. So for me, 9.2 out of 10.
Epic. So my favorite aspects of both of these films is the visuals, and I will just jump out and say it. I'll give this one more of like an 8. It's still James Wan. It's still well shot. He's got a couple good one shots there, but I feel like they were much more refined and memorable in the first Conjuring. I'm gonna be honest, I wasn't fond of the Crooked Man like at all.
Yeah.
I didn't like how the dog transformed into him. It just looked really clunky. And I think the first film did so good without showing us stuff like that, but this one dove into like CGI and showing us all this stuff. Like he kept kind of throwing the kitchen sink at us, for lack of better words. And visually, like for the most part, it's still scary. And like AJ said, that scene in the room with Valak is seriously really, really visually terrifying. I liked how the concept of her turning on the light or turning it off, you could still see his face in the dark, and you couldn't tell if it was the painting or if it was the guy. And I think that was a really fun aspect. Also, I really liked the visual representation of Ed's death, because we see the spike in the vision, but then we don't realize it's a tree until the very end of the film. And that shot of him holding Janet and hanging off the window, it's a little bit dramatic, but it just adds to the drama, in my opinion. So I think as a third act, visually it was very pleasing, like the lightning strike in the tree, the couch hitting Ed in the face, and then what's his name, the big guy chopping at the door trying to get in. And visually it was very, very pleasing, minus the Crooked Man. I'll give it an 8. What about you, man?
Hold on, let me record it before I forget, because I will forget. We are on visuals. Yep, an 8. For me, so from cinematography, for screenplay, this is actually, I think, better than The Conjuring. But like you said, Loretto, you're 100% right. The CGI takes it down a notch. So I'm going to give it the same score I gave The Conjuring, which is a 9.5. It still has that same atmosphere, that same dread, that ominous feeling, that it throws you right into the 70s, like in England. Like you feel like you're literally there. You know, you have like everyone smoking cigarettes, you know, like it has that vibe that it makes you feel like you're part of the film. So for me, it is 100% a 9.5 out of 10. And as good as it is cinematography, I fully agree that, you know, James Wan, man, I don't know why you went over and above with the CGI. You didn't have to do that. It's the scene of, you know, the boy playing with the fire truck going back and forth. That's enough. That was enough. That was great. But even visuals wise, like the scene of, you know, the girl where no one believes her. She's literally isolated, and you see it's her mom and the Warrens, and you see the Warrens leave her, and you see her at the window, like
at the window, and she's
like, don't leave me. Like that is an amazing scene. So visuals 9.5.
Epic, man. And just that, that's a really good segue to memorable moments because that's my number one. The freaking fire truck out of the tent. I was trying to finish this film at 2:30 a.m. Pacific time. And the second I heard that damn fire truck like rear and it came down the hallway and you see his little fort, I was like, nope. I turned on the Bad Batch. It got to me. I'm not gonna lie, I'm really jumpy. There wasn't even really a super terrible jump scare there, but it's just the suspense. I think the suspense is what really kills you in a horror film, especially like you look at A Quiet Place or any really effective thriller. When you're like holding your breath and you're like waiting for a moment and you're hoping nothing bad happens and you're on the edge of your seat, like that is like one of the most intense, like stressful feelings. And some people love it, some people can't get enough of it. But I'm really susceptible to that kind of stuff. So again, hats off to Mr. James Wan. He's a master. He crafts those moments so well. And I would say that the Crooked Man box thing, where you see like him dancing in the spinning wheel, it's not as effective as the music box, but it does have that same like, gives you some sense of dread, and it's actually really cool. I like how he like it reminds me of Disneyland. You spin the wheel and like you see the bouncing Mickey, and then you could draw one yourself. And a lot of amusing parks kind of play with those kind of concepts. So that visually was really cool and that was memorable. I think one more for me would be the scene in the kitchen. Mm-hmm. I love the one take of like Johnny trying to be a badass. Like I call him Charlie Bucket because he reminds me of Charlie Bucket. But he's inspecting the knives, and then they hear Janet disappeared, and then he turns and Janet's there with a knife. Yeah. Oh, awesome shot, man. But I want to save some for you too, man. There's some crazy moments in this one. I just saw it. What about you, Dives? Oh, wait, I should give it a grade. Memorable moments, I'll give it like a 8.5.
8.5. Got it. Christy says, late at night watching is a bold move. It's the audio and the sound effects. Try muting the audio before shutting it off. Huge difference. How about that scene where the girl is like in bed, or she goes downstairs, then she goes back upstairs, and it's just the sound effects, and you can hear, the ghost going up and up, and the creakiness, and eventually like she pulls the covers over her head, and you can hear the breathing. Like, it's so well done, man. It's so well done. The Nun and Warren study, arguably the scariest part of the movie, where you see the shadow of the nun go from the wall and then like goes to the painting and goes, the fingers over the painting. I love the ending of this movie where it started to go back. It started with Lorraine being completely isolated, alone, scared to death. And then you see Ed, the exact opposite of that. He's in this like haunted house, this demon house, nightmare situation where he's isolated, blind. He can't see. He's gonna die. Like that was like that feeling. There's like a good 5-10 minutes where he's done. Like there's no way he's getting out of this alive. And I love how, in retrospect, they needed each other. And just to piggyback off of that, weirdly, like my favorite moment of The Conjuring 2 is not even about the horror moments. It's not even about the scary moments. I love how they doubled down on the love and relationship between Ed and Lorraine. I really enjoyed the sequel, how they just kind of added layers to this couple. I adored these small moments where Ed's just sitting there playing the guitar, playing Elvis for all the kids who have been through so much. I love that like last scene of Ed and Lorraine like holding each other and slow dancing at the very end, where they're listening to like a 60s song, and it kind of gave me the same vibe of like Steve and Peggy dancing at the end of Avengers Endgame a little bit. Just so well done. Like I love that dynamic. That is the heart of why the Conjuring universe is so good, is Ed and Lorraine 100%. I can't wait to see the third one, obviously. But I give it an 8.5.
Epic, man. And I actually forgot one. I got to get this out because it really got me. The scene where Janet is watching TV and the remote keeps moving. And then she sees the reflection of Bill in the TV. And then she turns around and he's behind her and he's like, my house. I almost fucking crashed because I was playing it while I was driving out of my parking lot. Because I was trying to catch up while I was coming home from work. I almost like swerved my car. Epic scare, totally earned, and it was just so well shot.
Quick nod to like this was like The Conjuring 2 was James Wan combining the effectiveness of Insidious and The Conjuring. And like I love the little moments when the boy goes downstairs and he's looking for food and you see nothing in the living room. Then he comes back and there's like something there on the recliner. You know what I mean? Like
just rocking, silently rocking in the chair.
Oh, it's so good. Like those are my favorite moments of Insidious. Those are my favorite moments of The Haunting of Hill House by Mike Flanagan. I love those little touches. That kind of,
and it's like you blink and you miss it.
Yeah, it's like gives you that over sense of like dread and ominous feeling. It's awesome.
Hell yeah. So with that, let's talk about rewatchability. I literally just saw it. I don't know how often I'll revisit this one simply because I like the first one better. I'm gonna throw it out there, plain and simple. I actually really enjoyed the first one more, but I think in terms of the Conjuring universe, I think this is something that I kind of want to dive into now. I hadn't seen the other Annabelles. I saw the first Annabelle. So now that I'm kind of introduced to Valak, I know I heard a lot of bad things about the Nun, but I think just I'm a completionist, especially when I play games, when I play like fantasy sports. Like I see it through to the end. I don't care if I'm 2-10. I'm gonna play it to the end. I'm gonna fight, and I'm gonna take everybody down with me. So I'll watch The Nun. I'll watch Annabelle Creation Comes Home. I'm gonna see it all, and this film really kicked it off for me. So I don't know how often I'll come back to this Conjuring 2, but I'll give it, just for now, I'll give it a 7.
7? All right. Got it. I'm a strong 8. I actually think there's bits and pieces of this movie that are definitely better than The Conjuring. It doesn't work because I think Juan goes way too many jump scares. He goes way too much CGI, and that kind of takes you away from the movie a little bit. At least I take that back. Like I like that he gave you a fresh story. I like that he kind of went away from what made The Conjuring so successful. It was a completely different movie. I'm going to go with 8. We watched it this week, and it was awesome. It was actually better than I remembered it. And I honestly didn't think it was like The Conjuring is the best. Like The Conjuring is one of my favorite movie experiences ever. And I had like Conjuring 2 here. I will say after my watch this week, it was probably up here. It's definitely a movie that holds up really well. It's got some twists. It's a movie that you need to watch like closely, and it's just fun because I think what is so amazing about The Conjuring 2 is the family. You root for the family. Like this is a family that has nothing. And when all that shit is happening to them, you feel for them a lot more compared to the family in the first film.
Yeah, no, and I love it because I think that's a sign of a good filmmaker and a good film when you can rewatch it and it improves your score. So overall, I think in terms of the scares and in terms of just my overall enjoyment of the film, despite its kind of like Spider-Man 3 syndrome of just throwing everything at the audience, I'll give Conjuring 2 an 8.2. It was good. Just, B-, not quite a B+ for me. Like I said, that damn TV scare really, really got me. The fire truck scene had me so nervous that I wanted to watch Star Wars. And I think my problem with possession films in general is like, it's hard to find a really good resolve. I think the fact that, the name gives you power over the demon is the way that they presented it was well, but no matter what, it's kind of clunky, whether you're watching The Omen or, like I keep talking about the Amityville Horror, but that movie doesn't even have any resolution in itself in the first film. So there's only so many things you could do in a haunting tale. And I think for what they accomplished with this film, It's pretty good.
All right, give me 1 second while I calculate these.
What's your overall score though?
My overall score. Hold on, almost done. Trying to see what I gave it. Overall score is 8 point. No, I gave it a 9. I think there's like elements of this film that are so memorable. The villain is better. The family is better. It's just as well shot. The score is as good. Although the score doesn't work in the same element as like when it's like the shit hits the fan, the score doesn't work as well as it did in Conjuring 1. The Crooked Man doesn't work, but The Nun is absolutely terrific. It boasted its own franchise spinoff after this. I love Bill Wilkins. He was a really memorable character. It's just super scary, and I got to give it a 9. I think this is a movie that really holds up well. I'm really happy to kind of do this podcast because James Wan's one of my favorite directors. And I gave you guys this warning during our last verses that I'm going to be overly positive. And Conjuring 1, Conjuring 2 are terrific horror films. So I'm counting down the days so I can see Conjuring 3.
Nice.
Sucks to have a daughter. We have to get a babysitter, I guess. But Conjuring 1, Conjuring 2, it's an amazing franchise. It's not as good. Conjuring 2 is not as good as the first one, but if you haven't seen it, you absolutely have to watch the sequel.
Well said, man. And I'm torn. I'm really curious what Ryan thinks. I know he's a big horror guy too, so we'll get his thoughts later on. But before we do the final score, thank you, Chrissy, for joining the show. She's heading off to do her own live stream. But she says it's always great listening to us. Thank you, Chrissy. That's really much appreciated. Love the support. And while Dives is crunching the numbers, he's like our tech from the Bad Batch. I just want to say, if you guys don't know, tomorrow night, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific, we got the summer blockbuster movie draft. 10 teams, 6 rounds. We're going to draft the best summer blockbuster teams and let Twitter decide who drafted the best team. Our drafts are always a lot of fun. So please like and subscribe to us down below. Stay tuned to this channel tomorrow night. It's going to be so awesome. So without further ado, you got the scores ready for us or?
Yep. All right. So the final score for The Conjuring is a 92%.
That makes sense.
That should be 150 over 200. But our final score is 137.9 out of 150. I graded it the highest. Then it was you, Loretto, and then AJ at 45 out of 50. For Conjuring 2, it got an 84%, 126.6 out of 200. AJ gave it a 41. I gave it a 45.9, and you gave it a 39.9. Any quick thoughts on that?
It makes sense. I liked the first one better. The second one was a fun film, like a fun horror film to watch, but it just wasn't quite up to par with the first one, as good as it was, which is kind of, I feel like with horror films, that's kind of the downer, is like, you really have to step it up or exceed the first one. And a lot of times it's really difficult to do, especially when we've seen it all already at this point. So I think Quiet Place 2 suffers from that as well, but that's not what this show is about.
I just have to say, I would put it at like a B+. I think overall compared to the first Conjuring, I would like to. I think in general everyone agrees that The Conjuring is better than The Conjuring 2. It's just a more effective, well put together film. But man, if you haven't seen Conjuring 2, please go watch it. It is so much fun. It's got a lot of heart, way more heart than the first Conjuring. If that's something you're looking for. And it has an amazing demon that is awesome, even though it only shows up there at the very end. But the moments, the payoff is awesome.
Well said, man. I lost my train of thought, but that about wraps up our Versus series, Conjuring versus The Conjuring 2. James Wan is a horror master and just a talented filmmaker. His filmography speaks to himself. So from the Seat Up Geeks, if you're watching James Wan, we salute you. Well done, man. One of my favorite filmmakers of our generation.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
for Dives, for myself, this is the Suit Up Geek Fix podcast, and we'll catch you guys next time. Thanks for watching.